wait, hold on. Oh man. Okay.
We're
Hopefully
live.
this doesn't screw up. And we are live. Hopefully, we do get to see the remake in some way, shape, or form for the Toxic Avenger. I think we could definitely use that for sure. Welcome everyone to the spoiler room. So glad you could join us, venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair and popping. There we go. Our favorite beverages as we take a look at some wonderful murderous films this year. It is July is Murderous month, and we're continuing that with looking at films with the word murder in them, with looking at going back to the 30s. Boy, are we going back to the 30s.
We're doing another pre-code movie.
It is another pre-code movie, and I didn't even quite realize that till I did that. It's not necessarily part of our special, but it could be because Murders in the Rue Morgue is being talked about. 1932, Bela Legosi here is starring in this film that is based off of an Edgar Allan Poe story, apparently. We'll get into that. My wife has some opinions on that. Tonight, some other folks who may have some opinions on this are none other than this wonderful crew have joined me. First off, we have back with us, right-hand man, keeps coming back for more, one and only Mr. Ian Simmons, who just, we're talking about Twisters on your show, and here we are again.
We're going on like almost 3 hours tonight, Mark, of talking movies. This is great, yeah.
It's you just did it tonight?
Yeah, we just did it tonight, So great. I'm glad you used that word. Some people wouldn't use that. And then also with us, none other, the man, the myth, and legend himself, Mr. Joe Randazzo. Hello, Joe. How are you?
Hey, everyone.
So glad you could be with us today as we talk.
Just barely made it.
You just barely made it, too. Murders in the Rue Morgue. Ian, why don't you give the synopsis of Murders in the Rue Morgue tonight?
I'll just give the elevator pitch. It's King Kong meets Frankenstein meets Jack the Ripper and scene.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
It's pre-King Kong though.
So by about a year, more than that if you're talking about the story. But that's the thing that really kind of woke me up towards the end of this, and we're jumping way ahead to the spoiler portion, when the ape monster picks up the damsel in distress and starts climbing up buildings. I'm like, oh my God, this is King Kong before King Kong. This is incredible.
It was hitting some familiar beats when he did that, and I just looked at going, and then I'm doing the math in my head while I'm watching this going, oh shit, this was before King Kong, because this feels very familiar.
Yeah, but at least they used a real primate for the close-ups anyway.
Yeah, for the close-ups.
This film, based off of supposedly the short story by Mr. Edgar Allan Poe, that takes some very wide liberties with the story, according to my wife. But here we have a group of friends who go to the carnival, and they go to see this wonder of the world being held by Dr. Miracle.
Dr. Miracle.
Miracle. Not Miracle, but Miracle, played by Bela Legosi and his unibrow, which needed its own credit. And he features an ape, a gorilla, who he says has his own language and tries to teach evolution to the masses, who all laugh him off and such. But this one couple find him fascinating, and who's it, Dupin and his wife, girlfriend, and so there's an incident between them and the ape, and they go on. But the doctor is enamored by Dupin's girlfriend, and things ensue, and we learn that the doctor is actually doing a very early idea of genetic tests of sorts. But all the ladies he captures are ladies of the evening, sex workers, and he doesn't like the blood that they have, because they also have drugs and such in their system. So he decides that this one woman he met is going to be the perfect person to do his experiment with, which I think is crossing humans with apes. I think that's what he's going to do.
He's injecting he's injecting A blood into women in the hopes that he can create a mate for his gorilla.
Right. And so genetics. I mean, but
So,
1932, it's 1932 genetics. So let's just say there hasn't been a very massive amount of papers on genetics, I don't think, as of 1932. I'm not sure. There might be
maybe not in America, but sorry. No, like the prime mate. There's a pun in there somewhere, but it's one of the daffiest and most boring movies I've had to watch. This is like an hour long, and I swear I was with it for the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes. In the middle, I'm like, they even stopped to this like weird vaudeville routine where it's like, do you speak Danish? Yes, I speak Danish. Was he speaking Danish? I don't speak Danish. Was he speaking German?
How do you know he was speaking German then? How do you know he was speaking Italian then? It's like, oh yeah. That's always like, I saw this first as a kid because I was collecting all the Universal Monster tapes, and this one just bored me to tears back then, and it bored me today.
We've done it, folks. We have found one that has bored both my crew members. Mission accomplished.
I mean, I like that. I love that bridge scene early on with where Legosi abducts his first, the first victim. I love the way that's shot. I even like Robert Florey's movies for the most part. I just, for whatever reason, didn't. This one just never connected with me. But it was like, like Ian said, like even as a kid, I liked the first like 15 minutes. I liked the last 10 or so minutes, and everything in between. I was just like, come on, let's go.
Yeah.
Well, my wife said that, she's a huge Poe and Gothic, because she reads a lot more than I ever will. She's read more than I ever will. And she is very familiar with this short film. And it was hilarious watching her reactions as we watched this film, because she's like, that's not what happened. She's like, what the hell? Because our guy here, Pierre Dupin, played by Leon Ames, in the story, in the Poe short story, he's like pre-Poirot and pre-Sherlock Holmes. He's supposed to be like that type of level of detective who comes out of retirement to try to solve these murders that are happening in the story. And in here, he's some schmuck something reporter, I think, or something, who likes hanging out the morgue quite a bit, but he is not one of the world's greatest detectives here, or even the block's greatest detectives. He might be the apartment's greatest detective, but there aren't many people in the apartment.
He's a better detective than his roommate. There's that.
Right? Okay, so folks, this is pre-code, and while this isn't a pre-code special film per se, we can talk about it. You look at the first 5 minutes of this film, and you can understand where some people may have came up with the Hays codes from, because they run the gambit of like, they're in this crowd at a circus, and there's the misogyny, there's racism, there's sexuality worked in here. That, like, within the first 5 minutes, like, I'm watching this first, I'm going, oh damn. I'm like, oh. And then we finally get to the gorilla part, and then they get into that, and then I'm like, why'd they give Bella a unibrow? And then I was just but this film, it opens up interesting, and then it peters out for like 40 minutes. and not a whole lot happens. And I understand this is an older film, but we've looked at some other films from the 30s that have managed to keep the story engaging. And in this one, not only this, but also considering the liberties they've taken, as my wife put it, she's like, it wasn't a gorilla or a chimpanzee. It was an orangutan in the original story, who was owned by a sailor. And the orangutan still did the murders, but it was almost like you don't see the orangutan actually doing the murders or anything. The whole thing is Dupin, who's supposed to be a crack detective, figures things out. So there's very little. As she's watching this, she's like, oh, wait, that one moment was in the book. When the lady falls out of the fireplace.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Okay, that moment was in the book.
Yeah, and that moment, actually, right before that, he is putting the bullseye on himself for the police. There were 2 women in the well. How do you know? You're probably going to find one of them dead. Oh, there she is dead. The other one's going to die if you don't listen to me. Wait, are you confessing?
Yeah, it definitely gets wacky after a certain point. But I mean, I'd never read the short story.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't read a whole lot of Poe, but I've loved the title since I was a kid. Murders in the Rue Morgue. I thought this was gonna be like some kind of like a hospital slasher or something, but it's about a guy doing experiments on a primate monster. Maybe it's just this particular execution, but I'm like, this is kind of lame. What are we doing here? And I couldn't get into it until that third act that we're talking about with the kind of the King Kong thing. But that's not even fair, because that's me bringing my own kind of like, oh, cool, it's King Kong into it. It has nothing to do with the quality of the film.
Yeah, the coolest thing about it to you was something that they never intended because the movie didn't exist yet.
Exactly.
I will say this positive about it. I love the matte paintings. The paintings around the town. I think they look gorgeous. I love the way this movie looks for the most part.
Well, even
that's where it ends.
Well, even the way some of the camera work, considering this is 1932, when they do some of the camera work in here, actually surprised me in here. Like with the opening, the opening festival circus scene where I'm like, okay, static shot, we're gonna cut, and like, no, it trucks into the crowd a bit and kind of does this. I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't expect that. And there's some other things. Yeah, like you said, I think the best sequence in this film has nothing to do with the gorilla. It has Bela Lugosi coming up into this very expensive carriage. And how do you know it's expensive? The suspension on it is wicked on this carriage. You get into this sucker, you don't feel a single bump, because that sucker is like a gyroscope sitting there where it stays centered and everything is shaking around. But anyway, he comes across this alley fight in progress with a woman in distress over the fight, and he sits and observes it. And the way that whole section is edited and put together, outside of the beginning to the end, is probably the most interesting sequence in this film, because it's also creepy dark, because he goes up and the 2 guys end up killing themselves in the fight. And, Bella, I mean, he is just such a normal, very casual looking guy. I know if I was a person in distress on the street, I'd just go with him too, because he just he doesn't look like a vampire at all. He comes up and he goes, "Oh, my darling, I'll help you," because he's got a different accent, but it's pretty much, I was waiting for him to say he's from Transylvania, because he's pretty much Dracula with a unibrow. And,
well, that's the thing. The ladies are hypnotized by whatever's going on between his eyebrows. They're like, what is going on? Oh, wait, I'm back in your lair.
But she's distressed. She's in shock. She just watched these 2 guys knife each other over her. And this guy comes up and goes, "Oh, I can help you. Why don't you come with me?" And she's like, "Well, no, not really." And he just moves her to the carriage and then tosses her in and says, "Let's go." And then the next thing you know, you see her. I did not expect to see this on a 1932 film. She's literally in this, she's chained like S&M style, chained up into his lab. And I'm like, okay, that's imagery I didn't expect to see.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's this giant kind of X thing, and he's doing the blood test on her, and I love it. He says, "You cheated me. Your beauty was a lie." I'm like, wow, it was rough. But then, and then she dies, and he ends up dumping her body in the river, and it turns out there's 2 other corpses that they found naked, just like. People thought, oh, I guess they drowned, but no, they were dumped there. And the detective work, and it was kind of shoddy in old-timey Paris.
And by the way, speaking of the time, this movie is as old now as the events of this movie were when the movie was made, or roughly, because the movie takes place in 1845.
That's right.
90 years before this movie was made. And this movie's about 90 years old now.
Oh my gosh.
In the middle.
Wow.
So that kind of struck me right away. I'm like, wow, this movie is just the events of this movie are as old at the time of this movie as the movie is now. So yeah, that blew my mind a little bit. I love that there's just a trap door and he just opened it.
The trap door
goes right down.
Well, it was hilarious because our not Dracula has a not Igor guy who helps him, and he tells the guy, take care of the body while the doctor's standing right there, and all the Igor guy does is go over and pulls the lever on the trap door to drop her down, and I'm like, oh, well, that's convenient.
It was just kind of jarring too, because you just see a quick whip, and that's all you see of her.
It was brutal. Well, that's what I mean. This film is dark in so many ways. I mean, while it's slow and in the middle and that, it's still the tone and what this doctor does. You're just like, Jesus. Or then we get to the morgue too.
The tone of the movie is extremely. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying the morgue keeper. This guy, you know how we usually got the morgue and they're writing paper out and whatnot. He's like, okay,
yeah,
name,
put him
age,
in number 2.
how'd they die? Okay, bed 2. That's it.
Oh, when they bring the woman, professional, yeah,
yeah.
Immediately, she's a hooker. Because what other profession would a woman have in 1845? So that was kind of a nice touch. But I do want to go back to the I think the thing she was chained up to. I think it's the same one they use if you've seen The Black Cat with Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff. 2 years later, it's another Universal movie. I think that's what Lugosi ties Karloff to when he starts skinning him alive in that movie. So I think they got their use out of it. But yeah, the morgue attendant is very, all right, go put him in number 2. Go put him on number 13. Just very cold.
I did like the profession line. My wife even thought that was okay. That was kind of good. Was he just goes profession and he's like, yeah,
yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they say. And I'm like, oh yeah, that was some cool writing. So
that's the only profession she could possibly have.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the weird thing is there's so much grit and kind of darkness to this movie, and then you've got Pierre and Paul, I think his roommate is, or whoever, and there's just this, and the girlfriend Camille. It's like this romantic comedy thing that becomes this dangerous situation that doesn't gel with anything else in this movie. This should have been Dracula with those kinds of dynamics. But it's just not. I don't know. It's just, everything was very mismatched. And I think that's why I tuned out, is because when they go back to Pierre doing his little drawings and comparing his drawings to other drawings in books, I'm like, A, that looks terrible. And B, I just don't believe any of this stuff. It's the perfect example is there's a scene right before the fight on the it wasn't an alleyway. I think it was like a pier, right on a bridge. Right before that, you've got Pierre and Camille looking out over the city and talking about how much they're in love and they love the city, and then they kiss, and then it cuts right to these two people randomly fighting on this bridge, and this lady standing. It starts with the street lamp shattering, and then she's screaming and watching this happen. I watched this on YouTube because that's what was available, and it's 100 minutes. It's an hour long, and I was like, okay, is there a cut that I'm missing here? Nope. Am I watching an edited version? No, that's just the way this was cut. Exactly, it's very jarring. It cuts right into the middle of characters that we have not been introduced to, have not been mentioned. It's just a random street fight, and here's how things play in, because you see Dr. Miracle watching this from the carriage. I had to rewind it to make sure I didn't miss something, and it's not a good sign.
Same, and I'd seen this movie before, and I also had to rewind it to be like, wait, is there something missing? But no, it just literally goes to streetlight breaking, shot of the woman in the carriage, fights going on. You don't know who these people are. there's Legosi and his assistant looking on. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of the reason this movie's a little bit of a mess, and this is both of these guys, both the director and Legosi, were just about to make Frankenstein. Legosi dropped out because he realized his monster wasn't going to have any lines, and Robert Florey and Legosi moved on to do this instead of Frankenstein.
Oh.
Robert Florey never got an opportunity like this again. Never got an opportunity for anything on the level of a Frankenstein ever again. And Legosi created the guy who would basically replace him as the top star in the horror scene. So I don't know how much time. I could probably look it up how much time. Because I got my Universal Horrors book right here. I don't know how much time had passed, but I will look it up while we discuss a little more. But I just got a feeling that they just went right into production on something else because they had to do something to make some money when they just gave up what wound up being one of the most lucrative projects in Universal's history. So I think that's part of why this feels so disjointed. Maybe it was rushed.
Well, go ahead, Ian.
It could very well be. I mean, that the one of the few bits of real fascination was when the movie opens up with the credits and everything. One of the first names you see is Carl Laemmle Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And Greg Laemmle, who is his probably great grandson or something. There was a documentary about him called Only in Theaters that came out a couple years ago, and it was about sort of the Laemmle family legacy that they co-founded Universal Pictures, and they opened up one of the it's the biggest, longest running independent theater chain in California. And in that documentary, they talked about their history with Universal. They didn't talk about this movie specifically, but it is kind of fascinating. This is a legacy picture involving some, at least one huge name, but no one talks about it really. And I can see why now, but it's fascinating that it ends up so messy because I feel like the ingredients were here to make kind of a classic. They just fumbled it in a few places.
Well, I pulled up a couple trivia because I was just curious because being these old films, that's one thing I do love. Is how much trivia and stuff comes out. Here we are almost 100 years later. So you actually get these stories now. So our feeling that this film, there's something missing is not just us. The film was originally 80 minutes long when they completed it.
Oh, so there's 20 minutes. Wow.
Universal had them cut the runtime down because many of the violent sequences in it. Apparently, one of the violent sequences is the one we talk about where the woman is tied up in his lab. Apparently, there was a stabbing scene where he stabs the shit out of her before they dump the body. And apparently, there's almost 20 minutes of this film sitting on the cutting room floor because of the violence that they had in the film. Which you could kind of, like I said, that's where it had me because you could kind of feel it. It's like, this is some dark tones to it. And then, the editing just seemed very jarring through some of it. And I wonder if that is part of it, is the fact that some of these scenes and such were cut out or cut down because they thought it was too violent,
There was also, I'm reading here, a severe slash in the film's planned budget, originally $130,000, knocked down to $90,000.
Ooh.
Since Florey stalked off the picture, only to be coaxed back in short time. The film was in production 25 days, commencing October 19th, 1931, and wrapping November 13th, appropriately a Friday. Encouraged by Frankenstein's grosses, Universal put the picture back into production in December, upping the budget to a total of $186,000 after 7 days of retakes and added scenes. This was apparently, Florey suddenly found himself shoot off of Frankenstein.
And this ended the contract with Bela Lugosi and Universal. This film's failure.
And it also ended Robert Florey's contract with Universal.
Ooh. So how was it received? When it came out, did anybody care about it? Or?
From what I'm reading here, it was negative.
Poorly. It was poorly as well.
Yeah.
Probably because maybe they cut the original director's vision. Maybe if they left some more of the violent parts in, if it bleeds, it leads. Maybe if they would have left some more of the violent parts in, it would have been appealing to more audiences in some weird.
Yes, here the disappointing box office return for Murders in the Rue Morgue undoubtedly hastened Robert Florey's departure from Universal. He promptly signed on to Warner Brothers, where for a time he maintained a 4 or 5 picture per year grind, keeping his excesses in check while directing the likes of Bette Davis, Barbara Stanwyck, and Mary Astor in some of their early vehicles. Despite his affinity for horror material, Florey managed to avoid the genre for most of the rest of his career, although he was at his best in film with strong psychological underpinning. So
this film just hit all kinds of
issues,
all kinds of issues, plus the fact that, as my wife put it, it is nowhere near the source material. So if you had some people, because there was a lot more reading going on in the 30s than today, at least of books and not of short pages, I imagine a lot of people would probably be like just excited as people are now. Oh, instead of Marvel, it's like, holy crap, Edgar Allan Poe movie, another one. I'm going to go see this, the moving picture. I saved up my money. I'm going to go see it. And they go see it. They're like, this is not the book.
Well, I mean, that kind of raises an interesting question. Is like, why not adapt it? Why make so many changes? I don't know if we have any.
I don't think
thoughts on that.
Seen any insight on that. I looked earlier and couldn't find any insight on why they would have changed it so much.
There's anything fun about the writing.
What my wife was describing to me sounded just as interesting, but again, the detective in it was in two other short stories or stories by Edgar Allan Poe besides this one. But this guy, although in those books he was Augustine Dupin. Apparently, he was like a Sherlock Holmes type of, Poirot. He solved brutal crimes and violent crimes, and he was intended to be before, those other ones that we know and love. But in here, he's some schmuck. I mean, this guy, his drawing, and I loved it, and I know it's 32, but he draws the cells. Okay, here are the gorilla cells. And then here are the cells in the sample, and oh my God, my drawings match. I loved that bit.
Science.
I loved how they tried to do science in this 30. I give them mad props for trying to do something genetic with science, which is what they were going for in some odd manner. And they were totally playing to Bela Lugosi's popularity as Dracula, though, because he's practically. If they didn't give him, maybe that's why they gave him the eyebrows, because otherwise they figured maybe people would look at him and go, "Oh, it's Dracula. This is an indirect sequel. He's now experimenting on apes."
Or Dracula was considered sexy. Maybe they didn't want him to.
Oh yeah, that's
too attractive to women. That might be it too. Apparently, John Huston was on this or did an early draft of this as well. I tried to bring Poe's prose style into the dialogue, but the director thought it sounded stilted, so he and his assistants rewrote scenes on the set. There you go. As a result, the picture was an odd mixture of 19th century prose and modern colloquialisms. Sorry.
Don't you love how not only, as we've talked on this show all year, exploring these early 30s shows, but finding out that the common practices that people complain about today for Hollywood and what happens on set has been happening for almost 100 years. Oh, they rewrote it on set. What? Wait, what?
They're called traditions, Mark.
I know, they're traditions. Keeping the legacy alive, right? If it works, why change it, right? But I just love the fact how we've been reading some of these stories. You're like, wait, that sounds like today. What, producers got their fingers in it? They did rewrites on the set. What? It's like,
oh yeah.
Well, for a second, I thought you were talking about the actress.
Oh yeah.
The producers have their. Sorry, what?
By the way, guys, Universal Horrors is it's a tome for me. Like whenever I do anything on any Universal movies, I always make sure I dig through it. It's Tom Weaver. Credit to him, because anytime I do anything Universal related, I always dig through this book, look through the movie. he has everything down to what people were paid on some of these. So
Wow. Is that still in print? I mean,
I think it's out of print now. I know when I bought it, it was like $50. I don't know how much it is now, but it's huge. This is the second edition. I mean, you can see how thick this thing is. It is.
Oh wow, nice.
Tom Weaver.
Yeah, Tom Weaver, who is a great historian of old horror movies. I have a few of his books. He did this one covers all the Universal horror movies from 1931 to 1946. Then he's got one that covers the sci-fi movies that came after that, and that's where The Creature from the Black Lagoon is, because you're not going to find that in here.
Yeah, you can get the paperback on Amazon. Looks like for about $34.
Oh, that's not too bad.
Don't try to get the hardcover though, because that could go for 120. Because it is out of print. But yeah, the paperback apparently is $34 on. That's just me quickly hitting Prime Amazon on it. It looks like
$34 is not bad
for the paperback.
But yeah, apparently this hardcover is worth more than I paid for it.
Yeah, well, there you go. Gonna keep that in mind. But
sell it and buy the paperback.
That's right. There you go.
So, what people may find even more fascinating. So, yeah, with this film, it was disappointing because it starts off strong. It starts off creepy. You got creepy Bela. You got Bela talking about evolution in 1932 to the masses, which I thought was an interesting choice as well.
1932 audiences, but 1845.
Right, yeah.
As far as the movie.
Right. And as far as the movie goes, it's set in 1845. So that's even more interesting that they're trying to push that concept, to the masses in general. And then, him trying not to be Dracula, but in the end, this is like a Dracula fan fiction almost.
I mean, every movie Lugosi made in 1931 and 1932, even going as far as there was a Joey Brown comedy called Broad-Minded, where Joey Brown is terrified of him the entire time because he comes off as Dracula all the time. He just always comes off that way. So anything Lugosi does at this point, he's Dracula.
Yeah.
I do want to just off the top of my head make a note about this and how far because of this movie did terribly at the box office. Lugosi and Karloff would do The Black Cat in 1934. And I don't remember the exact number, but they had equal billing before the title. And Karloff was paid 7 times what Lugosi was for that movie. And Lugosi had even been paid on that movie less than David Manners, who was the love interest in Dracula. And he came back for The Black Cat and was paid even less than him. So this movie, Lugosi fell completely out of favor with Universal because of how bad it did. And
but why? I mean, why is that his fault? I mean, like he's an actor.
I guess for turning down Frankenstein, they just held it as a grudge against him.
Yeah, possibly figuring. Man, would you imagine a world where we had Lugosi as both Dracula and Frankenstein? That would make all those caricatures and all the portrayals later on in the world really weird. Well, you make up twins, I don't know.
He did play him once. He played him in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, and Lugosi did have speaking lines as the monster, but they cut them out because by that point in the story, Lugosi is in his first Frankenstein film in 1939 as Igor, and Igor, at the end of the following film, The Ghost of Frankenstein, succeeds in having Lionel Atwill take his brain and put it in the monster, and he speaks briefly as the monster at the end of Ghost of Frankenstein. And then in the next movie, he was supposed to have like actual dialogue, but apparently they just felt it was weird seeing the monsters. You could tell in the makeup, you could see the facial structure of the monster in that movie that it is Lugosi. They cut all his dialogue out. So it would have been an interesting thing to see, right? There's like 2 lines of dialogue at the end of Ghost of Frankenstein. That's it of Lugosi as the monster with a speaking role, even though it was Lon Chaney actually under the makeup. But that is about it for that. But yeah, they kind of held a grudge against him, and for a long time, up until 1939, when Son of Frankenstein was really successful, they wanted to get behind Bela again, and they unfortunately, by then the projects they were giving him were like The Phantom Creeps, which was a 12-chapter serial, runs about 4 hours long, and it'd be one of those cliffhangers, and it's just not good at all. But it's the dancing robot that Rob Zombie brings out. That's where he comes from. So actually, it's right here. Because I'm a fucking nerd. Also, we're going to be doing a whole season on Bela Lugosi movies on literary license. So I've been going through some Lugosi movies and making notes on them, and I don't want everybody else to suffer through the 4-hour version of The Phantom Creep. So they're going to do the 1 and 6 minute version, and I'm going to
4 hours.
Everything that's missing. Yeah.
Ooh, boy,
12 chapters. It would play for
well, it's 12 hours, yeah. So
12 20-minute chapters,
there you go. Yeah.
Throughout the year.
Yeah.
Just watching it all. Wow, that's impressive. I'm
not doing it all at once. I'm doing it in chapters, taking notes.
It's just hilarious because, not to just diverge too much, but
I've already done that.
We've already done. Well, I mean, the film itself is not that heavy or deep, in all honesty. But what always rolls back to me whenever I see Bela Lugosi is thinking of Ed Wood. And the more stories I hear now, the real life stories about Bela and that, I'm like, wow, Tim actually got things fairly accurate to what happened to Bela in that movie. Some of the things they bring up in that, I'm like, wow, his hatred towards Karloff, I could see why he might feel that way.
That part nobody knows if that's actually accurate, because a lot of people say he didn't actually have any ill will towards Karloff. That might have been just created played up for
but I could see if he did, it wouldn't be surprising because of just from what you were saying too, and later on too, the popularity of just in general, how they diverge, even though they were doing similar property. How they're
even on the same
diverge.
Projects.
Yeah,
even on the same projects. Lugosi's making 1/7 of Karloff's salary on these movies, but they have the same billing and they have equal time in The Black Cat. But Universal felt that Karloff was worth that much more money, so that's just what we got.
Well, I will say I am happy in Murders in the Rue Morgue that we did get one headshot of Lugosi staring straight into the camera and going towards it. I'm like, yes, we've got that shot at least. I'm like, yes, thank you for giving me that. Where Bela just looks creepy as hell as he stares into the camera and it just goes towards him. You're just like, I'm creeped out right now. And this is an old movie. And I'm like, he does
that. They get those shots in all his movies during this time, and it's good because they did it in Dracula, they do it in White Zombie, they do it in this, and he has that presence. He has a great face, to kind of look like he's hypnotizing you, And it does still come across 90 years later. It still comes across as like, holy shit, what is this guy doing to me? Is he actually doing something through the lens?
Yeah.
But what wasn't hypnotic, and I alluded to this earlier, was the primate face, because they did use an actual, I don't know what the hell kind of beast this was, but they cut from like a man in a suit for like the faraway shots, and then we got to close up. It was like stock footage of this monkey just baring its teeth. But it just looked kind of cute, but it was supposed to be intimidating and weird. They needed to just invest in some makeup to make a really creepy looking ape monstrosity and leave out the stock footage, because I just giggled every time I saw it. And it also needed a score, because there's bits where this creature is like stalking or what, not necessarily for the knife fight on the bridge, because that was kind of effective without any sound really, but for the bits where there's like Camille is at home and in bed and the creatures come up, you see the shadow of the hand. I'm like, there's just nothing going on. I need some suspense, some music. It feels like something's missing.
I mean, a lot of these movies around this time, they haven't really gotten the hang of scoring movies yet.
Right.
Right. I understand. This is sort of a modern point of view looking back on it. But as someone who, is immersed in that kind of language of film, I watch these old movies. I'm like, this is why they came up with those creepy, suspenseful scores, because it needed something. It was that punctuation on the moment.
It was kind of like this when we watched Alibi earlier this year, where we were like, there were so many sections of that movie where having a score would have actually enhanced it a lot. I mean, at some point between here and King Kong, because King Kong has a score.
Oh yeah.
So at some point,
they figured it out. I mean, they were still figuring it out. We're talking only 5 years from Jazz Singer, with this film, and Jazz Singer was not only a risk, but holy crap, I think for back then the money that it was I think it had a larger budget, but everything had to do, when you're talking scores and stuff, everything back then was done on set.
Yeah.
So I imagine with the budget, from what it sounds like Joe was telling us, especially with the budget being cut in that, they didn't quite have the resources to get the crew together on set for the day to record while the action was going on. But it did need it. It did need, I'd love to see someone go and make like an old school score to go along with this film, because
like Philip Glass did for Dracula.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago.
Yeah. Or what's his name did for Metropolis, when he put the modern score to Metropolis back in the early 80s. Giorgio, I think it is, or I forgot who it is, but when they found more footage of that film.
Someone recently also did it with the silent Phantom of the Opera, because a lot of the prints of that exist without any sound at all. And somebody took all the scores that Universal made for the 30s and 40s films and put it into Phantom of the Opera and like hit exactly the right tones. I got to find a link to that. And
nice.
Somebody posted it on Vimeo. It was somebody who just did it as like a passion project. Wow. And it does actually serve to enhance that movie a bit. But yeah, this movie, I mean, we've seen some movies where, the silence benefits the movie. Frankenstein certainly does. The Public Enemy, Little Caesar, I can think of all those moments where there's like this great silence. Even Scarface, the only score you really had was the whistling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that, that worked. It's just, even Old Dark House. James Whale did Old Dark House, and there are moments where that movie is completely and totally silent, and it works. And here, maybe it's just the tonal shifts, because while we get like these moments where like everything's really tense, but then we get things that are like Ian said, straight out of vaudeville.
Oh my God, I couldn't believe that conversation when they were confessing to the most useless police force in the world. These guys are like Keystone freaking cops. And yeah, they're sitting there, and I'm like, well, it was funny because I'm watching the three, and the one guy goes, well, they thought they heard a guy through the wall, because there's this thing where Miracle has this language with the gorilla, who has a lost language, but he's figured it out, so he could talk to the gorilla in this language. And so people thought they heard a language through the walls, but it's people trying to identify if he's Italian or what nationality he was. So you had an Italian guy, and they go, well, he didn't speak Italian. He sounded Danish. And then the Danish guy goes, well, although it was German. The German guy goes, well, no, he didn't sound German. He sounded Italian. And the Italian goes, no, he didn't sound Italian. I heard it too. He sounded Danish. And the Danish goes, no, he didn't sound Danish. He sounded, and I'm like, oh, don't say it. Don't say it. And then he said it. He sounded German. I'm like, oh my God.
And every time the cop asks him the same question, do you speak whatever language? Well, no. Well, then how do you know it was that language? It's like, Jesus Christ, man. And it just slows the movie down for like 3 or 4 minutes. It just slows it down to a crawl to do this terrible bit. And that's just what it is. That's...
Yeah, I couldn't make heads or tails of it, because I'm like, I thought I was watching a serious movie here, but we got to pull over for the yucks. I'm like, no, let's just get back to the danger.
I mean, James Whale does it well. Robert Florey, rest in peace. Not so much, man.
Well, but go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, but we even got that. I think it was supposed to be comedic in the beginning, where our group of friends are watching some ladies from another country. Okay, as the Barker put it, these exotic ladies are dancing very suggestively up there, and they have like 3 different couples where each one, the guy goes, "Oh," the one girl asks, "Oh, is their skin so dark? Is that real or paint?" And I'm just like, "Oh my god!" And the guy goes, "I don't know. I could go up there and find out." I'm like, "Oh Jesus!" And then like they go to the 2 other couples, and each one of them, the guy is just like drooling over these ladies. And I'm just like, and then it's set in what? London?
Oh, France.
No, Paris in 1845.
France. And so they get to this scene where they're talking about, we've got real Apaches here, and we have Captain USA or whatever it is, the guy that was captured by the Indians. And I'm just chuckling. I'm like, oh, wow. Oh, man. Okay. He's a real American.
In the middle of our serious, dark Murders in the Rue Morgue.
Yeah.
Well, in fairness, I mean, and we have this conversation all the time talking about these old movies, but it was in the beginning of the film when they're kind of establishing it that they're at this carnival with a lot of strange things going on. I think that's to set up that you've got this guy who's got this exotic creature, right?
Yeah.
It's part of the mystery. But also, I mean, you're talking about 1845 and you're talking about a movie that was made in 32. So yeah, a lot of these people, you're talking about Paris, they're not well-traveled people who are going over to America to see what a Native American looks like, or, exotic people with dark skin. How many opportunities? I know every TV show now has a multicultural 1830s London, where like it's like a Skittles bowl walking around, Piccadilly Circus, but that's not the reality. So you have to put yourself in the mindset of people who like, yes, there's someone with dark skin. I've never encountered that before. I'm curious about them.
Well, no, it wasn't. I wasn't necessarily making a point of the whole where they were the dark skin and pointing out Apaches. It was the joke or the gimmick that where you're doing with each couple, where each guy says pretty much the exact same thing, how they're going to go up there and be with the ladies or whatnot. And I'm like, wait, is this called Murders in the Rue Morgue? And you've got this kind of bit where they're just all doing this shtick of the guys drooling over the suggestively dancing ladies. And I'm like, okay, and it's similar later on. We get this Danish language joke, and you're just like,
yeah, it was more that it felt like too comedic for the tone that they were going for, more so than.
Well, I mean, but that's the thing is like they hadn't really established the tone of this. This is the first like few minutes of the film. True. So it's odd, but it's not like they had the carnival scene in the same spot as they had the vaudeville scene. Right. I argued the vaudeville scene, it doesn't work at all.
No.
But B, if you're going to have it towards the beginning, these people at the carnival just doing a bit on stage or something like that.
Yeah.
Once you establish this weird, eerie, otherworldly kind of carnival atmosphere, then you get to Dr. Miracle, and from there, it's serious all the way. Like, don't have any comedy because you don't have it. Like, as far as the ability to execute it, we've established that. But yeah, I forgive the carnival stuff because we're still in the period where like, what is this movie? True. Once you figure out what this movie is, you can't deviate from it, or else it falls apart.
No, it's a valid point for sure. Yeah, that they haven't really.
I'll concede that one to you. Legosi is a creep from the very beginning, though.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, my ape took your bonnet. Can I get your address and I'll bring you a new one? No, we're fine. No, I insist. They need your address. I can send you a new bonnet. Hey, follow her. Find out where she lives.
Yeah.
At least she didn't give it to him. I was waiting for that. Like she's the trusting rube.
It's what she didn't seem to be bothered too much when she gets the new bonnet in the mail.
Yeah,
wait, how does he know where I live?
Yeah.
We explicitly didn't tell him because my husband thought he's a creep.
Well, I found it funny that he goes, "Oh, what's your address? I'll send you the new bonnet." And she's like, "No." And then her boyfriend or husband, he's like, "No, I will not. You do not. Let's go, honey." He's like, "Oh, come on, please. I'll send you the bonnet." No, that's it. And I'm like, oh, see, even back over 100 years ago, people didn't want to give out their personal information. See, Leo.
Well, Well, that has changed now. Now we give our personal information to everybody.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Just remember, your porn star name is your first pet in the street you grew up on.
Yes.
Those are not things that I could ever use to figure out any of your passwords or banking information or anything like that.
Joe, I just came up with my porn name, and it's amazing.
I was gonna say, for mine, I'm not sure which genre of porn it would be in, but in any case,
my porn name is Chloe Hadley. I love that. Yeah, I could make something out of that.
Princess Galena. Come on now. I didn't
even throw that information out there.
I don't care. I don't have.
I like Princess Galena. Yeah, we're going places with that, Mark.
We're going. Got some sci-fi porn going on with that. Anyway, did you know that there were 2 other versions of Murders in the Rue Morgue made?
I was going to ask if they ever remade this or
1971. And I watched the trailer because my wife was curious about it, because I said, oh, there's 2 more. 1971, there was Murders in the Rue Morgue, which is not based off of the source material. Nay. It is a remake of this one. So it's pretty much the same story if you look at the trailer. But there was one more. 1986. Here's the cast. George C. Scott, Val Kilmer, Rebecca De Mornay, Ian McShane, Neil Dixon were all in a Murders in the Rue Morgue TV movie in 1986.
I'm going to try to find that.
Wow.
Directed by Janot Swarek.
Jaws 2.
It was directed by him in 86. And this cast, I looked at this cast because I looked it up and I'm like, because I looked at the movie poster and I go, is that Val Kilmer? I go, is that George C. Scott? And then I pulled it up the IMDb and like, holy crap, look at this cast list in this.
I assume George C. Scott is playing Dr. Miracle. Is that right?
No, he's playing Augustine Dupin because, again, Augustine, in here, he's actually August Dupin. In here, he is actually a retired detective brought back out of retirement to discuss.
Oh, so it's all an Americanized version of it or something? Or
Well, no, this is actually based off of the actual source material, this movie version, from everything that I've seen versus the other 2.
In the original short story, he's retired and he's brought back to solve the murder.
Right. I guess what I'm getting at is is this like a French period piece?
Yeah, it's done as a period piece.
Do we have Val Kilmer trying to do like a weird French accent?
I'm going to find out.
I watched a clip of it, and no, because I think they moved it though from France to Britain.
Okay.
I think it's not, or they're British in France. It's hard to say.
Well, some of the actors in this movie were downright American, and British. It was a very strange mix of patois.
It wasn't a bit in Murder in the 1932 version. There was a strange mix, but yeah, this cast is insane for this 86 version. So
the whole movie's on YouTube.
Yeah. Whoa! All right.
And this one, if you read the synopsis, is actually more sounds like the source material. Mysterious and grisly murders of a mother and daughter leave police investigators puzzled. Few clues left behind. A killer fled with the door nailed shut, nor was the killer observed leaving the neighbors. It seems the only person with the skills to solve the crime is Auguste Dupin, who has been released from the police department by the new prefect. After much persuasion, his daughter, whose fiancé is charged with the crime, Dupin begins to investigate the case on his own and puts together quite an interesting scenario to solve the crime. So that sounds like the source material, which is what it was, because as my wife said, the whole gimmick with that was Dupin comes out because these murders are solved, but the doors are locked for the time period it came in. So everybody's like, well, how did this happen? And it is still the orangutan, spoiler, doing the killing, but he's coming through the windows. He's crawling up the buildings and he's going in and killing the people.
See, I thought you were going to say the way they got in was they had a doll that the church made and they dropped it off the families. And sorry.
And then the ape just sat and observed as the doll did as the doll killed the killings. And then the ape
fucking long legs. Anyway, I want to see what the 1986 made-for-TV movie version of the ape monster Eric looks like. That's got to be amazing. Oh, we didn't name it. This creature had a name.
His name's Eric.
His name is Eric. Yeah,
with a K. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting that he had an actual like basic like name, like Eric. It's not like some other like name we usually see of gorillas or apes or something like Bobo or something. Like, no, it's Eric. And you're like, oh, that's uninspired. Considering you're talking to the ape, did you ask the ape his name? He could have asked him if he could talk to the ape, you know. I know we joked about it, but at least give them mad props to when they wanted to do ape close-ups, they used the stock footage rather than some guy in a mask. I mean, you know, I give them props for that, though they could have used the guy in the mask because this gorilla outfit was used on another movie in the 50s, apparently. They brought it back. So
they probably used it in a lot of movies.
Probably
that Bob Hope version of Cat and the Canary probably used it too. They ape in that version, if I remember correctly.
Maybe they used it in
Universal, I think.
Maybe they used it in Trading Places too. No. But there you have it, folks. Murders in the Rue Morgue, 1932, an odd duck. And probably one of the only entries that I agree with the panel that ended up being kind of a dud for me. I mean, there are fits and spurts of interesting scenes, but this one just didn't do it for me. And I was hoping for it because I like Bela and the title and the concept. I'm like, okay, I'm all in. And then you watch it and you're just like, oh. and that end gorilla scene, folks, if you do watch this and you've seen King Kong, he crawls up the building to a smokestack that looks like a tower. You have the crowd below with our main character looking on below. Okay, he's not completely carrying. He's carrying a very shitty dummy. Oh, we get two shitty dummies in this. We get mannequin shitty dummy when the gorilla is carrying gorilla, the guy in the suit. And then when the gorilla falls off, he's a shitty dummy. The gorilla falls off into the river. So we get two shitty dummies in this. So there is that. So we hope you enjoyed this discussion, Murders in the Rue Morgue. Even if you're a Bela fan, prepare yourself accordingly. It is only an hour. I'm not sure if the extra violent scenes that they cut out, the 20 minutes worth, would have kept this as interesting. It's hard to say because story-wise, it feels like a mess. And it sounds like they should have just stuck to the source material because the original material sounds fascinating. So thank you so much as always. Thank you to my panel. Thank you to our live watchers tonight. And now, as always, I give a license to shill to my panel. Joe, please, the floor is yours. License to shill is yours.
I'm with the Literary License Podcast, and we'll be recording our next couple episodes this coming Friday and releasing them soon. Although we do have a little bit of a backlog. We're going to be doing Spirited Away and Kiki's Delivery Service for our Dark Families portion. And then we're going to be doing, as I joked last week, and we'll continue to, one of the greatest horror anthologies ever made with 1945's Dead of Night, and one of the worst anthology horror films ever made, 1961's The Devil's Possessed. That's it for what I'm shilling right now. I'm not on. There's other stuff bubbling, but not yet.
Awesome. And Ian, please shill away, sir.
Well, I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com and also right here on YouTube. And we do live streams and interviews and movie reviews and stuff. I just talked to Mark about Twisters earlier this evening, so you can go and find that in the old archive. And I think next week we'll be talking Deadpool Wolverine. So we'll see if I like that more than Twisters. But check it out.
And next week here on the Spoiler Room, we will be closing out Murderous Month with Blue Murder at St. Trinian's. Hey, I pronounced it right. Yay! Got over my whatever mental block that it was.
Yeah, watch next week. We watch the movie and we find out that it's pronounced some weird way, and Mark wrong.
No, I watched the movie. That's how I know.
Okay.
I got through my mental block of not being able to pronounce that damn word, and it's Trinians. And yeah, I don't know why I had struggled with it. It's called Blue Murder at St. Trinian's, and it's a comedy. It'll be interesting to see what my panel thinks of this British comedy, which, according to the cover of this DVD, the British Institute, a British institution empire, says it gave it 5 stars. So we'll see what happens with this film. It is an interesting one. I'm just very curious, especially after tonight, what you guys might think.
Mark, there aren't any like jokes about like, oh, do you speak Danish?
No.
Okay.
I've got to look up what the term blue murder actually means, though, because, well, I'll let you guys watch it.
They were telling a really offensive joke while they killed people.
I'll let you guys watch it, and we'll figure it out. We'll discuss next week. So you have that to look forward to, folks. And then, yes, next month we are doing By Any Means Month, where we're looking at films where there are folks who will try to move up in the world by, well, any means necessary. And that will include our 500th episode, which will be Showgirls. Yes, folks, we are covering the film that I have not watched since it was first released on video, Showgirls, for our 500th episode. I did not like it then. Will I like it now? Will I appreciate it now that I have like 30 years of film consumption to compare to? We'll find out. Plus, we'll probably do other things for our 500th episode. It'll be played loose as they always are with them, but I hope you tune into that as well. And every week here on the Spoiler Room. And until next time, folks, we'll just say a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.